my own mom whispered. I wish you were never born. Right before I cut off my whole family. Hi, I'm Clark, 30, and the last real thing my mother ever said to me was, I wish you were never born. It was Angela's 50th birthday. We were standing in the coat check room of the Riverside Country Club, just 15 minutes before I walked out of my own family. She'd pulled me aside, squeezed my wrist like it was a stress ball, and hissed those words like she'd been storing them for decades. So when I stepped back into that glittering ballroom, I didn't whisper. I stood tall, looked my mother straight in the face, and said, Consider me as if I never existed. Live your lives as though there was never a son named Clark. 70 people froze. The string quartet stopped playing mid-Vivaldi. Champagne tilted dangerously in crystal flutes. Natalie, my younger sister and our family's resident golden child, was the first to react. Her cheeks flushed like a slapped face. Clark, you're being dramatic. Mom didn't mean it like that. She meant it exactly like that. The venom was still fresh in my ears. I scanned the room. Faces I'd known my whole life stared back like I'd become unrecognizable. My father, Thomas, hovered by the dessert table, eyes wide, stuck between guilt and maybe relief. Uncle Greg buried his attention in his phone. Aunt Lorraine pretended her napkin tears were earnest. Maybe they were. I let the silence stretch. I mean every word, I said, my voice cutting clean through the stillness. From this moment on, I release all of you from any obligation to acknowledge my existence. No calls, no holidays, no birthdays. I'm removing myself from this family completely. Click. 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 Natalie stepped forward in her stilettos like she was taking the stage at a pageant. You can't just walk away because Mom said something in anger. Family doesn't work like that. I actually laughed. A low, stunned kind of laugh that felt like it came from someone else's mouth. Family doesn't work at all when only one person is doing the work. I wasn't even angry anymore. I was exhausted. Because I'd spent 3 decades trying to earn something I finally understood was never going to be given. Growing up, I thought the distance between me and my mother was just a phase. Like eventually, she'd see me, really see me, and realize I was worth loving. I figured I just had to check the right boxes. Be impressive enough. Be good enough. Be her idea of a son. But Angela had Natalie. Born 3 years after me, with her high cheekbones and natural charisma, she was the mirror image of everything Angela loved about herself. I got Grandpa Morrison's broad shoulders and a jawline that made me look perpetually serious. I didn't fit the picture. While Natalie joined cheerleading, I joined the debate team. She had prom photos in the yearbook. I had a full-ride scholarship to Johns Hopkins and no one to celebrate with. Angela called me, so intense, like it was a flaw. Thomas, my dad, stayed neutral like it was a sport. You were born old, he used to say. Always thinking, always working. When I got into med school, they sent a group text. No call. No celebration. I told myself it was fine. I'd escaped. Baltimore was 5 hours away, and that distance was a kind of freedom. I immersed myself in cadavers, trauma rotations, and surgical drills. The lab felt like a place where effort mattered, where being good at something meant you got to stay. I became a trauma surgeon. Assistant director by 28. My name's on a protocol used in 4 hospitals now. Angela still introduces me as our son who lives far away, and talks over me to brag about Natalie's yoga certification. Tonight was supposed to be different. I'd booked the country club myself. Hand-selected the caterer. Hired a string quartet because Angela once said she liked classical music when it sounded expensive. I flew in a specialty cake from Vermont because of some throwaway comment she made last Christmas. And then she looked me in the face and said those 7 words. I wish you were never born. All because I'd asked why I wasn't seated at the family table. The table where Natalie and her fiancé Daniel sat. Where Angela's world revolved comfortably around everyone but me. Thomas, my father, finally moved. He set his whiskey glass down like it was an explosive device and said, Clark, let's talk about this privately. No need to make a scene at your mother's party. I turned to him, calm as a scalpel. You mean the party I paid for? The venue I booked 6 months ago? The string quartet I hired? The cake I had flown in from another state because Mom said she missed that patisserie in Vermont? I smiled without warmth. Sure, Dad. Her party. A ripple of discomfort moved through the room. Mrs. Patterson, Angela's best friend since the Reagan administration, actually gasped. Daniel looked down at his shoes like they had something fascinating to say. Angela's face was blotchy now, a shade between crimson and rage. How dare you? She hissed. After everything we've given you? After all we sacrificed? Stop. I didn't shout. Just slice the word and clean. You gave me a roof until I turned 18 and a college fund that didn't even cover a full semester. Everything else I earned. My scholarships. My degrees. My residency. My life. The words poured out of me like floodwater. Do you remember my high school graduation? You left halfway through to catch Natalie's dance recital. College graduation? You skipped it for a golf tournament. My white coat ceremony at Johns Hopkins? You said Baltimore was too far to drive for just the ceremony. But when Natalie got engaged, you flew to Paris. For the photos. Natalie's eyes widened. That's not fair. You never said how much those things mattered to you. I shouldn't have had to. My voice cracked, but I held steady. Children shouldn't have to beg their parents to show up. The coat check girl peeked around the corner. I locked eyes with her until she ducked away. Let her talk. Let them all talk. Let everyone in this room carry this story to their brunch tables and holiday getaways. That Clark Morrison, the invisible son, finally set himself on fire loud enough for them to see. Uncle Gregory cleared his throat. The sound of a man who wanted to disappear into a canopy. Clark, you're upset. Maybe we should all take a breath and talk later when emotions aren't. My emotions are perfectly calibrated. I cut in. You're a dentist, Uncle Greg. You know what it looks like when someone grits their teeth for decades. I glanced around the room, and no one, not one person, could meet my eyes. People who'd been in my life since I was in diapers suddenly found the ceiling tiles fascinating. Let me ask you something. I said, voice steady. Where were all of you when Angela forgot my birthday 3 years in a row? When she made it clear that Natalie was the one she showed off while I was just serious? Natalie looked like she wanted to melt into the floor. Clark, I didn't know. You didn't ask. I snapped. You didn't listen. I could feel the heat climbing up my neck. I forced a breath. Slowed my pulse. I was the responsible one. The quiet one. The one who didn't need attention. The one who handled his own problems because he didn't want to be a burden. Aunt Lorraine finally spoke up, her voice watery. We thought it would get better with time. That Angela would come around. I turned to her. A 30-year phase? That's not a parenting style. That's a personality. Daniel tried to speak. I didn't let him. You've been engaged to Natalie for 3 years. How many times have you invited me to dinner? Once. How many times has Natalie called me just to check in? Twice. And both times she needed something. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the ice sculpture melting. You all had 30 years to act like I mattered. Don't start now because I finally said I'm done. Thomas finally stepped forward. What do you want us to say, Clark? That we've failed? That we've been bad at this? He raised his hands slightly. Fine. We've been bad at this. But families work through their problems. Only when everyone wants to. I replied. I've spent my whole life clawing to get in. The only difference now is, I've stopped trying. Aunt Lorraine took a step closer, her voice soft like she was talking to a wounded dog. Clark, your mother loves you. She just has a hard time showing it. I tilted my head. 28 years is a long time to struggle with basic emotional literacy. Somebody choked on their Prosecco in the back. I didn't care. People take language courses that are shorter. I added. She could have picked up I'm proud of you in Duolingo by now. A few nervous laughs escaped the crowd, quickly stifled. Angela didn't laugh. She stared at me like I was an insect she couldn't squash. Then Natalie tried the nuclear option. You're being selfish, she said, her voice trembling with rage. This is Mom's birthday. You're ruining it just to get attention. The words hit me harder than I expected. I stood still, forcing my jaw not to clench. I'm not ruining anything, I said slowly. I wanted this night to be perfect for her. I built it for her. Every detail. I gave her the stage. She chose to burn it down. Thomas asked, low and tired, what happened in the coat check room? His voice carried the weight of a man who already knew the answer. Angela's eyes flicked toward him, then me, sharp with warning. She told me she wished I'd never been born. I said, because I asked why I was seated at table 12. With the Hendersons. Gasps. Real ones. Mrs. Patterson's hand flew to her chest like a slow-motion soap opera reaction. Angela's face paled, but she still tried. I was just trying to balance seating. The Hendersons asked for interesting company? I said. Or did you just want your disappointment son to stay out of the photos? I reached for my clutch. My phone. I'd started carrying it like a shield now. I work 80-hour weeks in a trauma center, I said. I hold hands as people die. I save lives. And you thought I was best used to entertain awkward guests while Natalie sat at the family table. Angela didn't respond. Because there was nothing left to say. Thomas stepped forward, that lawyer stance clicking into place like muscle memory. He even held his hands the same way he did during depositions, palms out, trying to reason with the jury. Clark, please. Let's talk this out like adults. I didn't move. Adults acknowledge damage. Adults apologize. Adults don't let emotional neglect fester for 3 decades because it's not the right time. I turned my gaze to Angela. She stood there like a statue carved from judgment and denial. You got your wish, Mom. I said, my voice low but clear. As of tonight, I was never born. You have one child now. Cherish her. Because she's all you've got left. I turned toward the exit. Nobody stopped me. Not Thomas, not Natalie, not any of the cousins or neighbors who had watched me grow up and watched me walk away without a word. The string quartet stood frozen beside their instruments, unsure whether to resume playing or start running. When I stepped outside, the November air slapped me awake. Sharp and clean. The country club lights glowed behind me like a set I'd exited, script torn to shreds. My car waited at the edge of the parking lot. Just as I'd left it 3 hours earlier when I was still stupid enough to think maybe, just maybe, tonight would be different. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. A text from Natalie. How could you do this to her? On her birthday? I powered the phone off without responding. Whatever drama was about to spill into my inbox could wait. Or better yet, never arrive at all. The 40-minute drive back to my apartment was quiet. The roads were empty. I didn't turn on music. I didn't want noise. I wanted space. When I walked into my apartment, small, clean, mine, I felt something strange settle in my chest. Not guilt. Not anger. Just certainty. I'd done the right thing. Even if no one in that room ever believed it. Back in my apartment, I changed out of the navy suit I'd bought specifically for Angela's party, the one she didn't compliment, didn't even notice, and hung it in the back of my closet. I'd donate it later. No reason to keep anything that still smelled like that ballroom. Sleep didn't come easy. I lay in bed for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying the night like a courtroom cross-examination. Had I gone too far? Was I cruel? But every time that doubt crept in, I heard her voice again. I wish you were never born. That wasn't said in anger. That was said in truth. Whispered, not shouted. Cold, not chaotic. Morning brought clarity. And coffee. I stood in my tiny kitchen, watching the sun claw its way through my blinds, and I felt something inside me shift. Resolve. I opened my laptop and logged into my bank account. Every dollar I'd set aside for holiday gifts and birthday dinners? Gone. I transferred it all, $7,200, to my student loan account. Then I opened my email and wrote to Christine Walker, my attorney. Subject, legal inquiry, personal. Need consult on establishing legal separation from family. No contact, no financial entanglement. Timeline immediate. Please advise on options. Send. My phone had exploded overnight, despite the blocks I'd put in place. Natalie, Thomas, a few aunts, one cousin I hadn't seen since 2014. All asking if I was okay. All circling the word overreaction like vultures around roadkill. Delete. Delete. Block. Repeat. At the hospital, my shift started at 3 p.m. The chaos of the ER was a strange kind of relief. In a world of blunt force trauma and cardiac arrests, emotional bruising doesn't stand out. I fixed broken ribs. I reattached a severed finger. I stabilized a teenage girl with a ruptured spleen. No one asked me about my family. Dr. Marshall passed me in the hallway and said, "You look exhausted, Morrison." I replied, "Family drama. The kind that doesn't resolve in group chats." He just nodded. In trauma, you learn not to push. During a break, I found myself in the staff kitchen, stirring powdered creamer into hospital coffee, when Dr. Martinez joined me. She sipped her cup like it was gasoline and said, "You've got that look." "What look?" The one people get when they finally burn the bridge they've been living under. I didn't say anything. She continued. I cut my father out 5 years ago. Best decision I ever made. Everyone said I'd regret it. I haven't. Does it get easier? The guilt gets quieter, she said. And one day, you wake up and realize you're not angry anymore. You're just free. Her words sank into me like anesthesia. Christine called me back during my next break, 2:17 a.m. Her voice crisp despite the hour. Got your email, she said. Can you come in today at 4? I had a cancellation. I'll be there. Her office was on the 15th floor of a downtown tower, the kind with curved glass walls and furniture that looks expensive and uncomfortable. Christine greeted me in a blazer sharp enough to slice drywall and a stare that had definitely won court cases by sheer force of precision. I explained everything. She didn't flinch once. So, you want a clean break, she said, flipping through her legal pad. No contact, no financial ties, no assumption of future obligation. Legally speaking, adult children can't really divorce their parents unless abuse or safety is involved, but… She looked up. We can build a firewall. She laid it out like a surgeon planning an amputation. Change beneficiaries on all my accounts. Update my medical power of attorney to someone I trust. No more defaulting to family by blood. Explicit instructions to the hospital about who can and can't access information about me. While leaving everything to charities. A cease and desist template on standby if contact crosses into harassment. We do this right, Christine said. And your next of kin is whoever you say it is. No surprises if you're ever unconscious or incapacitated. I nodded. Do it all. And we did. Over the next 2 weeks, I untangled myself from 30 years of implied obligation. Every form, every signature, every notarized line felt like regaining inches of oxygen I hadn't realized I'd been living without. Thanksgiving came and went. I worked a double. Ate turkey on a paper plate in the hospital cafeteria surrounded by other people who had made peace with chosen solitude. No one asked why I wasn't with family. In medicine, you learn that every family is worth returning to. By mid-December, my apartment looked like Christmas had walked in, shrugged, and politely turned around. I bought myself a tiny pine in a pot, decorated it with hand-painted ornaments from a craft market. Each one meant something. A stethoscope for my promotion. A puzzle piece for the kid I helped diagnose early autism. A tiny airplane charm for the vacation I booked, for myself, to Iceland in February. Life felt quieter. Not empty. Just intentional. Then Patricia, the hospital social worker, caught me between shifts. Silver hair, calm presence, eyes like she could read your entire emotional history without asking a question. I heard you're spending the holidays alone by choice, she said gently. I run a group for people navigating family estrangement. No pressure. 2nd and 4th Tuesdays, conference room B. You're welcome if you want. I took the card. Didn't say yes. Didn't say no. Just folded it and tucked it into my pocket like something fragile. On December 24th, a manila envelope showed up at my door. No return address, just a courier and a windbreaker who asked me to sign and offered an awkward Merry Christmas, before vanishing down the hall. Inside was a formal letter. Thomas Morrison and Angela Morrison were requesting my presence at a family mediation session, to restore harmony and understanding in advance of the new year. The law firm wasn't my father's, but it had his fingerprints all over it, right down to the phrase, good faith effort. I shredded it. Not out of spite. Out of clarity. On Christmas Eve, snow fell. The real kind, the kind that silences the world and makes everything look softer than it is. I walked to the hospital. No music in my ears. Just snow crunching underfoot and the strange calm of a city emptied for holiday rituals I no longer took part in. At 9 a.m. On Christmas Day, while reviewing a chart, Dr. Kim found me in the lounge. Your family's here, she said. I blinked. What? In the waiting room. Security's holding them, but they say they need to speak with you. Angela. Thomas. Natalie. I felt my spine stiffen like it always did when I braced for impact. Tell security to ask them to leave, I said. If they don't, they can call the police. They're not welcome here. Sarah raised an eyebrow. Got it. 20 minutes later, my pager buzzed again. Security wanted me in the waiting room. Against my better judgment, I went, flanked by 2 guards, Sarah trailing behind like backup. There they were. 3 people who looked wildly out of place in a hospital full of bleeding people and beeping monitors. Angela wore heels and pearls like this was brunch. Natalie had her ring hand propped up on her purse. Thomas stood like he was in front of a jury again. Clark, he started. We need to talk. No, you want to talk, I said. There's a difference. Angela stepped forward. Sweetheart, it's Christmas. We should be together. I didn't flinch. Don't call me that. You've never used that word once in my life. We're not leaving until you hear us out. Natalie snapped, voice carrying across the waiting room. A few patients looked over. You can't just walk away. I already did. I nodded to the guards. Escort them out. If they resist, call the police. Thomas's mask cracked. Clark, please. We made mistakes. We want to make it right. You had 28 years. I said. You told me I didn't exist. I'm honoring that wish. Natalie clutched my arm. I'm getting married in March. I want you there. I want my brother there. For a second, I felt that old ache. The little boy who loved his little sister. Who helped with her math homework. Who bandaged her knee when she fell off her bike. But then I remembered her standing in that ballroom. Calling me selfish. Calling me dramatic. Choosing Angela over me without hesitation. I hope you have a beautiful wedding, Natalie, I said quietly. But I won't be there. They left. Natalie crying. Angela stiff. Thomas unreadable. When the doors slid shut behind them, Sarah touched my shoulder. You okay? I looked around at the chaotic beauty of the ER. Getting there, I said. And I meant it. That night, after my shift, I walked home through streets muffled by snow and lit with leftover holiday cheer. My apartment welcomed me with silence, the kind I used to fear but now wore like armor. I made pasta. Simple. No fanfare. Just garlic, oil, and a bit of heat. I ate it on my couch with a medical thriller in my lap and my tiny pine tree blinking softly in the corner. No tinsel. Just peace. My phone buzzed once. An email from Christine. Clark. Just confirming everything is finalized. Legal boundaries are in place. If they contact you again, we move to harassment charges. You're free. Christine. Free. The word didn't feel triumphant. It felt still. Like the air right before a storm breaks, only the storm had already come and passed. I wasn't wreckage. I was the thing that remained. 6 months later, my life looked different. I'd been promoted to assistant director of emergency medicine. More meetings, more authority, fewer hours in the OR, but more impact on how we ran care. I implemented a trauma intake protocol that dropped triage errors by 12%. My research paper got accepted to the Journal of Emergency Medicine. I bought a condo downtown. Nothing flashy. 2 bedrooms, one for me, one for visiting guests or someday, maybe, a partner. Riverview. Big windows. Everything in it chosen by me for me. The furniture, the paint, the art. No inherited clutter. No history. Eliza, no, sorry, Natalie, got married in March. I didn't go. But I heard about it through the hospital grapevine. One of my colleagues was there, apparently. Said the wedding was tasteful, and Angela cried. Good for her. I felt nothing. And that, more than anything, felt like closure. One Tuesday in early September, Sarah and I were having our usual dinner at our usual spot, a little Mediterranean place near the hospital, when she suddenly stiffened and said, Don't freak out. Your mother just walked in. I turned, slow and deliberate. Angela stood near the hostess stand, thinner than I remembered. Pale, almost gray. A scarf tucked carefully around her neck despite the 70-degree evening. Our eyes locked. She murmured something to the hostess and started walking toward our table. Want me to block her? Sarah asked. I shook my head. No. Let her come. Angela stopped at the edge of our booth, clutching her handbag like it held a life raft. Clark, she said, voice trembling. I was hoping I might run into you here. I blinked. This is the 4th time I've had dinner here this month. I know, she said. I've been checking. So you've been stalking my dinner reservations? No, she said quickly. Just hoping. What do you want? Angela swallowed, lips trembling. I'm dying. Angela said the words like they explained everything. Like dying was a shortcut to redemption. Pancreatic cancer, she added. Stage 4. They're giving me 6 months. Maybe less. For a moment, I couldn't hear the restaurant. Couldn't feel Sarah's hand brushing the table or the air conditioner humming overhead. All I heard was the clinical timeline ticking inside my head: weight loss, jaundice, late-stage detection. Her grayish tone. The scarf. The desperation. It tracked. I nodded once. I'm sorry to hear that. And I was. Not in the way she might have hoped, not with the sudden rekindling of mother-son sentimentality, but as a doctor. As a human. I wouldn't wish that on anyone, I added. Angela's eyes filled with tears. Her makeup, always perfect, held for now. I know I don't deserve your time. I know what I said that night was. She paused. Unforgivable. But I need to try. I want to make peace before I go. I need you to know how sorry I am. You're not sorry, I said, picking up my water glass. You're dying. That's not the same thing. She flinched. You've had your whole life to make peace, I continued. You waited until you didn't have a choice. I didn't know how to fix it, she whispered. I thought time would soften things. Time doesn't soften things, I said. It calcifies them. Until the damage hardens so deep, it can't be cut out. She reached for my hand. I pulled mine back. Not angrily, just with finality. You wished I was never born, I said flatly. You don't come back from that. Angela blinked rapidly. I didn't mean it. Yes, you did, I said. Maybe not forever. Maybe not entirely. But in that moment you did. And that was the truest thing you've ever said to me. She said nothing. I looked at her, this woman who had shaped me through absence more than presence. She looked so small now. So fragile. And still, not safe. You have a daughter who loves you, I said. You have Thomas. Let them carry you through this. But I'm not part of this goodbye tour. She wiped at her eyes, and for a second, she looked like someone who had finally come to the edge of herself. Will you at least think about it? I shook my head. No. I already have. She stood there for a beat longer, then nodded slowly and turned away, heels clicking softly on the tile. Sarah exhaled across from me. Jesus. I'm fine, I said. And strangely, I was. 3 months later, my phone rang from a number I didn't recognize. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some instinct buried deep in the bones of my childhood, made me pick up. Clark, a voice said. It's Gregory. Uncle Greg. The one who drove me to the hospital when I broke my arm at 12. The one who never said much but never made things worse either. Before you hang up, he said gently. Please just give me 30 seconds. I waited. Your mom passed away this morning. Peacefully in her sleep. I just thought you had a right to know. I closed my eyes. Not from grief. From the ache of old, unused muscle memory trying to fire. Thank you, I said after a moment. For telling me. I'm not calling to guilt you or convince you to come to the funeral. He added quickly. I thought you'd want the option. There was a pause. And then, softer. For what it's worth, I think you were right. About everything. Angela, she loved you, but it was always through a filter. One she never took the time to clean. We hung up. I stood in my kitchen for a long time, staring at nothing, then texted Sarah. Need to take a few days. Not for the funeral. Just for me. I didn't go to the service. Didn't want to stand in a room full of condolences that never showed up when they were needed. I didn't want to watch Natalie cry for both of us, or Thomas deliver a eulogy that scrubbed the edges clean. Instead, I packed a bag and drove to the coast. There's a small bed and breakfast there I like. White shingles. No TVs. The kind of place that smells like pine and salt and homemade muffins. I spent the weekend walking along the water, letting the cold wind chew through my coat, watching the tide drag itself in and out like breath. I thought about the boy I used to be. The one who waited for Angela to smile at his report card. The one who watched her beam at Natalie's gymnastics medals while he stood in the back row of the science fair, alone. The one who asked for a telescope for Christmas and got socks. And I thought about the man I had become anyway. Resilient. Capable. Calm in the chaos. On Sunday, before I drove home, I stopped at a roadside flower stand and bought a single white rose. I carried it up to a cliff that overlooked the sea, stood on the edge of the world, and let it go. I forgive you, I whispered, not for her, but for me. Then I turned around and walked back to my car. toward my life. Back in the city, the air felt heavier, like life was ready to get moving again whether I was or not. I threw myself into work. Not out of avoidance, but out of devotion. The ER doesn't care if your mother dies or if your childhood was a mess. It demands precision. It demands presence. And in a strange way, that felt like home. The week after the funeral I didn't attend, I got a package. No return address, but the handwriting on the label was unmistakable. Natalie. Inside was a photo album. Leather-bound. Cream pages. A note tucked in the front pocket. I don't expect this to fix anything. But I found these while packing up her house. Some of them surprised me. Thought they might mean more to you than to me. Natalie. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were photos I didn't know existed. Me at 3, covered in spaghetti. Me at 6, holding a handmade volcano with a proud smile. Me asleep on the couch with Angela draping a blanket over me, unaware she was being photographed. I sat there flipping pages, hard hammering, and wondered, had she seen me? Even a little? Had she just not known what to do with what she saw? I didn't cry. But something in my chest cracked a little. The kind of crack that lets air in. That night, I called Natalie. She answered on the first ring. Hey, she said. No venom. Just tired. I got the album, I said. Thank you. She exhaled. I wasn't sure if I should send it. But something told me you needed to see it. That I needed to see it. There was a long pause. She wasn't a good mom to you, Natalie finally said. She was protective of me, but with you. I don't know. It's like she didn't know how to connect with someone who didn't need her. I needed her, I said. I just stopped saying it after a while. I know. We didn't talk about forgiveness. We didn't unpack everything in one call. But we stayed on the line. For almost an hour. Talking about work. About her nonprofit gig. About a book I'd just read and wanted to lend her. About Dad, still silent, still unreachable. When we finally hung up, I didn't feel peace. Not entirely. But I felt the door crack open. And this time, the cold air didn't scare me. A few weeks later, Natalie texted me a question I didn't expect. Do you want to go through Mom's house together? There's still stuff in the attic. I'd rather not do it alone. I stared at the message for a long time. The house. That house. Every room packed with tension, every wall hung with photos where I was either missing or out of frame. It felt radioactive. But then again, maybe it was time to stop being afraid of ghosts that couldn't hurt me anymore. I said yes. We met on a Saturday afternoon. Natalie was already there, sitting on the porch steps, arms wrapped around her knees like she was holding herself together by compression alone. Thanks for coming, she said. I almost didn't. I know. Inside, the house was frozen in time. Throw pillows still fluffed. A faint trace of Angela's perfume lingering near the hallway mirror. Everything too tidy, too curated, as if she might come home at any moment and scold us for touching anything out of place. We started with the attic. It was a graveyard of forgotten projects, boxes of old tax returns, half-finished scrapbooks, a sewing machine with dust like velvet. Natalie opened one box and gasped. It was full of letters. All addressed to me. I reached for one and scanned the first few lines. It was from Angela. Dated my sophomore year of college. Clark. I don't know how to say this without sounding like a bad mother, but I've always felt like I didn't know you. Like you came into this world already complete, already sealed. Natalie needed me. You didn't. Or maybe I told myself that because I didn't know how to reach you. I read 3 letters before I had to stop. All unsent. All unspoken. All too late. She never mailed any of them. I said, more to myself than to Natalie. She couldn't even say I'm proud of you without making it sound like a question. Natalie said. This was her way of talking to you without risking rejection. She said she wished I was never born. I whispered. Natalie looked at me, and her eyes were as raw as I'd ever seen them. She regretted it the second she said it. She just didn't know how to undo it. There was silence. Not heavy. Just honest. I took the box of letters with me when I left. Not to keep. Just to know they existed. Proof that maybe, just maybe, some part of her had tried. Even if it was too little, too late. A month later, I stood in front of a lecture hall full of medical residents, talking about high-pressure decision-making in trauma. A question came from the back. How do you stay calm when everything's going to hell? I paused. Thought about it. Then said, you don't stay calm. You stay present. You keep your hands moving. You let adrenaline do its job, but you don't let it drive. They nodded, scribbling notes. Some of them would remember that answer. Most wouldn't. That was fine. Afterward, I packed up slowly. Normally I left fast, ducked out before anyone could thank me or ask too much. But that day I lingered. Let one of the residents, Eli, I think, ask if I had time for coffee. We walked to the cafe across the street. He wanted to talk about burnout. About whether you ever stop feeling like you're sprinting underwater. You don't, I said. You just build better lungs. He smiled, but there was weight behind his eyes. I saw a flicker of something familiar. The look of someone who was holding more than a job inside their chest. Your parents proud of you? He asked out of nowhere. I stirred my coffee. They would be. Some days. Other days, not so much. I think mine only see the paycheck, he said. Not the person. Then stop trying to earn what they don't know how to give. He blinked. That's heavy. I nodded. Yeah. But true. When I got home that night, Natalie had dropped off a package. No note. Just a small frame, wrapped in brown paper. Inside was a photo I hadn't seen before. Me and Natalie, ages 5 and 2. Sitting in the grass in our backyard, both wearing ridiculous paper crowns. I had a popsicle. She had dirt on her face. Angela must have taken it. It was crooked. Unposed. Real. I hung it in my hallway. Not for her. For us. For the version of us that still existed somewhere beneath the years. The version that still believed love might come if you just waited long enough. Now I knew better. Love doesn't arrive because you wait. It grows when you protect what matters and let go of what never really did. By spring, the hospital had settled into its familiar rhythm of barely controlled chaos. I'd learned to ride it like a wave, duck under when it crests, surface when you can breathe. One Thursday, Sarah cornered me during rounds with a smirk on her face. You're on the keynote panel for the trauma symposium next month. I blinked. I never submitted. You didn't have to. The board did. They voted unanimously. I stared at her. Why? She shrugged. Because you're good. Because you've rebuilt half this department's protocols. Because someone needed to talk about what it means to lead without losing your soul, and apparently you're the guy. The guy. I used to want that title so badly. Now it felt earned. Later that night, I found myself walking the perimeter of my condo, restless. I glanced at the corkboard in my office, the one where I'd pinned my Johns Hopkins acceptance letter, my first paycheck stub, and now, one of Angela's letters. Just the first page. Not as a wound. As a reminder. A few sentences were underlined in red pen. I didn't know how to love someone I couldn't control. You didn't need me. And instead of being proud, I resented that. Underneath it, I'd scribbled a note in pencil. That's not love. That's fear. I stepped onto my balcony, city lights blinking like neurons in the dark. Somewhere down there, Natalie was starting to find her own rhythm. She texted earlier about a grant her nonprofit had secured. First time I'd heard her genuinely excited about something that wasn't filtered through our parents. We were different now. Not perfect. Not healed. But truthful. That's what I'd started to value most. Not reconciliation. Not manufactured family dinners with 2 stiff napkins and 2 tight smiles. Just the truth. The raw kind. The useful kind. I stayed on the balcony a long time, letting the breeze find the back of my neck. There were still scars. Still echoes. But there was space, too. And space, that was something I'd fought for. And won. In June, Natalie invited me to brunch. Not a guilt brunch. Not a, Dad's coming, be civil, brunch. Just us. She picked a small cafe on the east side, one of those airy places with exposed brick, overpriced eggs, and baristas who look like they know your star chart. We sat by the window. The light hit her differently. She looked lighter. Thanks for coming, she said, stirring oat milk into her coffee. I know brunch isn't really your thing. Brunch is fine, I said. It's the small talk I hate. She laughed. Noted. We talked. About work. About a friend of hers going through a divorce. About Sarah and her latest hospital politics drama. Nothing heavy. Just life. until she set her fork down and said, "So, I'm thinking about selling the house. Angela's house." I didn't speak. I waited. I talked to Dad. He doesn't want to live there. Too many ghosts. I don't want it either. I thought maybe I'd feel different after she passed, but honestly, it's just drywall and silence now. I nodded. You don't owe her a shrine. She left it to both of us. She said, legally, I mean, 50-50. But I don't want your share. I don't want anything you don't want to give. I sipped my coffee. Sell it. Split it. Use your half for something that feeds you. Travel. School. A dog. I don't care. Her eyes softened. I thought you'd argue. I'm too tired to argue about a house that made me feel invisible. Natalie reached into her bag and pulled out an envelope. This is yours. It's the final letter she wrote. I didn't read it. I stared at it. Didn't take it. You don't have to, she said quickly. I just didn't want to be the one who decided whether you should. I nodded slowly and slid the envelope into my coat pocket without opening it. We paid the check. She tried to cover it. I let her. On the sidewalk, she hugged me. Full, real, no pageantry. I'm glad we're still trying, she said. Me too. That night, I sat in my living room with the envelope on the table. I made tea. Turned on a lamp. Let the city hum around me. And finally, I opened it. Inside was a single page, handwritten, slightly shaky. Clark, I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I want you to know, I did love you. I just didn't know how to love you well. And I see now, that makes all the difference. I'm sorry. Mom. I folded the letter, set it in the drawer with the others. Not to forget. But to remember that love, when it's real, isn't just a feeling. It's a skill. And some people never learn it in time. A year to the day after I walked out of that ballroom, I stood on stage at the state medical conference delivering a keynote on emotional resilience in trauma care. The room was packed, doctors, residents, hospital administrators. My slides were clean. My tone steady. I ended with a story about a boy who grew up translating silence into survival, who thought competence would earn love, who eventually learned that the only person he needed to prove anything to was himself. When I stepped off stage, I got a standing ovation. Not polite. Earned. Back in the green room, I checked my phone. A message from Natalie. Watched the live stream. You were incredible. Mom would have been proud. I am. I sat for a moment, letting that settle. I believed her. That night, I went home to my condo. I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving, poured one glass, and stepped out onto my balcony. The city below sparkled like it had forgiven everything. I pulled the final letter from Angela out of the drawer, read it one last time, then tucked it into a fireproof box, not because I needed to revisit it, but because some chapters deserve to be kept, even if they'll never be reopened. I wasn't a son who got closure. I was a man who built it for himself. The scars didn't vanish. They just stopped defining the story. I looked around at the space I'd created, my space. No ghosts, no shadows, no edited versions of me trying to earn a seat at the table. Just one chair. One voice. Mine. I raised my glass to the skyline, whispered quietly. I made it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need anyone to clap. I was enough. I always had been.